You know, if there's one question I get asked more than any other, more even than, "Are you okay?" that question would have to be, "Mark, is the Canon Serenar 85mm f1.9 a dream lens for the Leica Thread Mount, or is it just a feverish nightmare designed to steal your soul while you sleepwalk through photography?" Well, today we're going to try and answer that question. Firstly, yes, I am okay, thanks for asking, but I have to admit I wasn't a few weeks ago. Quite the opposite. I was playing the role of academic road warrior, bringing the university magic to Bhutan, Bangkok and Berlin, and something just wasn't right. I'd be presenting to a group of education agents, and all the time my mind was on autopilot, delivering the goods while there was a niggling voice in the distance critiquing my performance. Now, I don't normally listen to my inner voice. I've always taken the view that that's something the Catholic Church put in there to stop me masturbating, but maybe this time I should have paid attention. If you haven't seen the previous video, then welcome to the channel. If you have, then welcome back, and why aren't you subscribed yet? Come on, do it now while I wait. And while you do that, if you have seen the previous video, then you'll know that for sure the altitude of Thimphu made me a bit dizzy. But perhaps because of that, I ignored the symptoms and powered my way through my Bangkok duties. And it was only on the final night that I had time to go out and take some photos. I had a goal, and that was to shoot with this lens, the Canon 85mm f1.9 Serenar for the Leica Thread Mount. I did have my Canon P LTM rangefinder with me, but it was night and I figured that I would make the most of the low light capabilities and magnification factor of Micro Four Thirds, plonking it on my Olympus Pen F Digital and turning my 85mm into 170mm of street behemoth. By the time I hit those streets, though, the fever was starting to kick in. The weather was hot, and it had been raining, leaving the streets full of puddles and strange neon reflections, and the whole experience started to take on the form of some hallucinogenic dream. And that ended my last night in Bangkok. Brain-addled and burning up, the next morning I jumped on a plane to Berlin with the whole experience already just a chimera of a fragment of an intense, weird memory. My first impression of the photos wasn't great, but let's focus first on the lens itself. And first thing that'll strike you about it is that it's heavy. At 610 grams, you could club a baby seal with it, but you probably would also feel the weight of it after a hard day on the ice flats. As a lens, it's definitely unbalanced on just about any camera you put it on, whether it's the Olympus Pen F or the Canon P, which itself is a pretty hefty fella. The second thing you'll notice is the beautiful chrome finish. It's a beast, and every phallic millimeter looks like it's contributing to that weight. It feels significant in the hand and looks imposing when you put it on your camera. I think it's quite beautiful, but you be your own judge on that. Being first manufactured in 1951, there'll be a lot of sample variation after over 70 years. But it's also fair to say that this one at least focuses very smoothly, and the aperture clicks softly but resolutely as you set your f-stop. In the last video, I talked about the fiddliness of the Fed 50 Industar 10 aperture pin. This does suffer from being at the front of the lens, so if you try to change the aperture, you're likely to throw off the focus if you don't hold it with both hands. But it's still a step up. You don't have to look at the front of the lens to see what aperture you're at. Speaking about throwing off your focus at f1.9, you can imagine that this has a razor-thin depth of field. That's mitigated to a large degree by the long focus throw. You'll see it took me a few turns to bring the image into focus on some of that footage, which makes for a slow but very accurate experience. Of course, the lens is only going to work as well as the camera it's adapted to. The Pen F, it's a beautiful camera that's getting a bit old now, but adapts this lens well. You can make use of both magnification and focus peaking, and it lets you manually enter lens information, so the image stabilization automatically adjusts to the 85mm focal length. That's important for stills, obviously, to get the sharpest image from it, but it's also great for video. While this is definitely not a great video camera, its baked in 1080p still work quite well with the lens, and you'll see some examples of the video performance in the next sequence, because somehow I'd managed to drag my consumptive carcass through customs, and by now I was in Berlin, Germany. Don't ask me how the flight was. I was hopped up on paracetamol and antihistamines, but I did find myself wandering the streets while waiting to check in and thought I'd better take a rapid antigen test just to be sure, and well, that explains a lot. Suffice to say, I worked the next couple of days out of my hotel room doing live presentations from Teams and missing out on all the fun. Honestly, I felt like fat, sweaty Elvis belting out "I Need Your Love" to an expectant Vegas crowd, giving everything while I was slowly being eaten up inside by COVID. Other than quick trips to stock up on water and rats, I pretty much hibernated in my hotel until the final night. Was I feeling better by that stage? Well, I'd been through the brain fog, body aches and fever, and the snot was starting to congeal. I should at least have been less virulent, but in any case, I needed to eat, and it did occur to me that one of the advantages of a telephoto lens on Micro Four Thirds is that I don't have to worry about getting up close and personal. Its minimum 1 meter focus distance isn't quite enough for social distancing, but I wasn't doing macro. I could just lurk in the shadows and latch onto the light while the world moved around me from an appropriate distance. So there you have it, 2 hallucinatory outings with the Olympus Pen F Digital and the Canon Serenar 85mm f1.5 Leica Thread Mount lens. As I said, I wasn't initially excited by the results, but let's chalk that up to the despondency of the delirium, because really, this is a lens very well suited to the Micro Four Thirds system. Doubling the focal length on a half-frame sensor let me keep a safe distance from my subjects, and overall it was a dreamy combination for my nightmarish experience. These things usually cost around 500 Australian dollars on the auction sites, usually from Japan, and I actually bought this when I was in Tokyo in 2019. So it's not a new lens to me, even though it's a new lens to the channel. One of the things I love about this lens is that it's versatile, so you can use it both on film and adapted to digital, and really, it begs the question as to why you'd spend a lot of money on a Micro Four Thirds telephoto lens, if you don't mind manual focusing or need the speed for sports and wildlife. All standard lenses on the Micro Four Thirds system are telephoto anyway. Most vintage lenses have quite fast apertures, and a lens like this Canon will get you there and give you a unique experience both in terms of usage and the results. Most of the time, I've used this on my Canon P. It doesn't seem to like my Zorky 4K so much. It twists the rangefinder cam, throwing the focus accuracy out, but it's a dream on film. Perhaps a bit less exciting because it's a much more standard telephoto rather than just having the sharpest center point. You've got the full frame. That can be a bit soft at f1.9, yeah, but it's still usable, and as you can see here, I've had plenty of good film photos out of the 85mm. Now, not every shot from this trip was a keeper. You've been spared some of the wobbliest, grainiest and out of focus examples, though I've got to say that even when out of focus, this lens is capable of producing some amazing results. One of its distinctive characteristics, of course, is that f1.9 aperture, allowing you to capture some nice separation between the foreground and background. Whoever said you can't get decent bokeh out of a Micro Four Thirds sensor obviously hadn't seen the results from this lens. Of course, lots of vintage lenses are fast, but lenses outside of the 50mm focal length with this kind of aperture are rare, and even rarer. Have a look at the aperture blades on this beast. There are 12 of them, helping to create some beautiful background blur and circular bokeh balls. Now, it's not the kind of blur that you'd expect from modern glass. Those just out of focus elements can be a bit jittery. Unlike modern fast primes, which obliterate the background into a blended mush, this still leaves a few chunks in the thermomix to add a bit of character and texture. but the combination of fast aperture and long length gives enough of that full frame look, enough to appease at least the most hardened crop sensor critic. To try and pick 6 figments from the photographic firmament was tough, and I wanted to choose more because, hey, this is digital and I wasn't limited to 36 frames. I think there were a few styles that really lent themselves to this process. I did manage to avoid, I think, or at least I hope, some of the problems of telephoto street portraits where you're so close as to remove any context and your pics just come off pervy. That was particularly difficult in Soi Cowboy in Bangkok, not the most discreet place anyway, where the narrower streets meant for a more cramped environment. Hopefully these ones still managed to convey something of Bangkok other than just intimately capturing a bunch of masseurs on their tea break. The other extreme was just leaning into the bokeh and going for the abstract photos, again particularly of Bangkok where the rain and reflections led to some pretty cool effects. I was tempted to pick this one, but my OCD-ness won't let the technical imperfections through, so I'll just pick this as one pure abstract picture for my top 6. I do think it's a genuinely cool photo. The others are a bit more standard fare, more environment than portrait. The figures are objects in the scene, more urban geometry of course, and arguably this would have been better in black and white, but I do like how the compression of the telephoto flattens out the image, where it's like your eye moves through layers of planes rather than genuine depth. It makes an image like this, which is probably my favourite of the bunch, come across almost like a stage set, where the people are just characters moving around a scene, which is exactly how I like people to be most of the time anyway, and is particularly resonant, I think, to that sense of isolation I was feeling in my Bangkok and Berlin photographic fever fugue. So tell me, if you've stumbled on this video, I'm assuming it's because you have at least a passing interest in this lens. Do you have one, and what is your experience with it? Does it live on your screw mount rangefinder, or have you adapted it to digital? Or maybe it's just on your shopping list, in which case, was this video enough to trigger that impulse purchase? Or perhaps you're just interested in rambling monologues as I chase ghosts through the fevered streets of Berlin and Bangkok. In any case, comment down below and keep the conversation going as we try to give form to the febrile phantasms of our photographic forays. Later.